Welcome. Thank you for coming. My name is Bill James Abra, coordinate the Climate Momentum group here in town, which is our homegrown Perth County Climate Action Group. And among the things we do is we host this series of mixers, usually 3-4 times a year, here at the Parlour, with a guest speaker and the chance to meet and greet with folk and to ask questions and get some ideas for our local community. Because the focus of Climate Momentum is on encouraging, resourcing, building the networks for individual action and community action. So we also do some advocacy with the city to try to push the city's coordination of community action as well. And I know a number of you here have also found your way into Climate Momentum through the Climate Conversations series that has been driving all through the winter, once a month, focusing on topics that are more or less tied to the Community Climate Action Plan that the city's developed. So, Karen is going to introduce Franz. Just a couple of thank yous before we get started. I'd like to thank the organizing committee, which is Miriam's at the door, Denise Diddy, who's not here tonight, and my wife, Karen. I think it makes it easier that we're both doing this together. And sometimes it doesn't. And I want to especially thank the Parlour. Steve Ireson is the manager here, and he has generously given us this room time and time again for us to use for these mixers. So if you have a chance, as I know a couple of you are, to stay for dinner or have one of their famous pavlovas, tonight's the night to do it.
Well, I'll add my welcome to Bill's. I'm so delighted that you've all come this afternoon. I'm sure you all know of someone who's not been able to afford a place to live in Stratford. And no doubt you also know about the devastation of farmland close to the city. And we believe that housing and environmental concerns are very closely related. And that's why we've invited Franz Hartman from the Alliance for a Liveable Ontario to come and speak with us today. He can help us know what questions to ask of our political leaders as we as we vote in the next election. Franz Hartman is the coordinator of the Alliance for a Liveable Ontario, and he has a long history in the building alliance and community engagement. Franz served as chair of the Ontario Greenbelt Alliance from 2014 to 18, and as coordinator of the Alliance for Liveable Ontario. He's been doing that as coordinator since 2019, and he's helped the Alliance build vast community support for the Greenbelt. Franz was the executive director of the Toronto Environmental Alliance, or T for short, for 11 years. And under his leadership, TEA succeeded in getting key environmental policies adopted by City Hall, including a new climate action plan and a zero waste program. Franz expanded T's community engagement activities in all areas of the city and enlisted many non-environmental community partners. And prior to working at T, Franz was the environmental advisor to the city councillor Jack Layton and oversaw Jack's civil society engagement activities in Ottawa. Franz has taught numerous environmental policy courses at the University of Toronto and is regularly asked to deliver lectures and talks across Ontario. He has a PhD in political science. And apart from all that, he enjoys science fiction and woodworking. So we're very delighted that you were able to join us today, Franz, and we look forward to your presentation.
So Just a bit about the Alliance for Liveable Ontario. We were conceived of in fall 2022. We were born in January 2023. We're an alliance of people and groups spanning hundreds of thousands of Ontarians because of our members who have come together essentially to oppose provincial policies that are bad for the environment, that eat up farmland, and that frankly don't do anything to solve the housing crisis. We're made up of 1,000 individual members and hundreds of organizations, including organizations that represent farmers, environmental groups, land use planners. We have developers on board, neighborhood associations, a whole wide broad spectrum. We're a big tent of bringing people together. And when we're in that tent, we talk about housing and land use planning effectively. We pretty well don't talk about the rest of what's going on, because this way we can focus on what brings us together. So just a bit about myself. I grew up in suburban Waterloo, which is not too far from here. This is the house that I grew up in. This is a picture from Google Street View, I think from about 2012, 2011. You can get a sense of, most of you have probably been in Waterloo. It's near the university, about a 5-minute walk west from the university. And when I did my undergrad at University of Waterloo in political science, then moved to Toronto and decided I wanted to do my PhD, got involved with a local environmental group there, which was very young, called the Toronto Environmental Alliance. I was one of the first volunteers there, and started working on urban environmental issues, because I realized that the spaces we live in have a huge impact on the relationship we have with the natural world. And depending on how those spaces are organized and connected, and what's in those spaces and the sort of activities that we have in these spaces, that can actually harm or it can help our relationships with the natural world. And so I did a PhD, and just probably about 4 months before I graduated, for reasons I still don't quite understand, Jack Layton hired me on to be his environment guy at City Hall. And went from being very poor to all of a sudden having a paycheck. Like, wow. And what Jack taught me very early on is the incredible connection between housing and the environment. And I kind of knew that, because housing, of course, is all about land use planning. Land use planning determines where housing takes place. And I, at that point, was very interested in, the climate crisis, which didn't get a lot of airtime, but for those of us who were paying attention to this, realized it was important. So I've kind of known since 1998, when, hands-on working with Jack, that these are very connected. And I realized that at some point, I told myself, I'm going to get involved in land use planning issues, because that matters. And where we put housing, what sort of housing we build, the sort of transportation systems that connect us, what sort of resources we bring in, all of these things matter. And I want to be involved in that, because if we don't get our cities right, our communities, our neighborhoods right, we're just going to make the climate crisis worse. So that's what drives me. So anyway, that's where I grew up in suburban Waterloo. And now I live in Toronto. And for those of you who know Toronto, this is near Bloor and Dufferin. That's my house with the red door. Single family, 4-bedroom house, completely overhoused. My wife and I live there. Our daughter moved out about 5 years ago. Big place. And we're right across from a beautiful inner city park. I often walk around there. I can tell you there are 154 trees in that park. We're very, very lucky to be there. And this is where I hope to grow old in. That's a laneway house. How many of you know what laneway houses are? Okay. We have a laneway, and until June 2022, yep. Or was it 2021? COVID, right? We used to have a 2-car garage there, and we tore it down, and we had this built. And this is a 2-bedroom. I'll show you some pictures in a few moments. laneway house, about 1,000 square feet, and it was designed by a green architect, Monica Kuhn, based in Toronto, who's done a lot of stuff on green roofs. And we said to Monica, design us a house that we can age in place in. So the stairway, for example, there's stairs going to the second floor. It's wide enough for us to put in one of those chair lifters at some point. I hope I never need it, but you never know. That gives you a bit of a sense of what the inside looks like. We have a very big open concept, main floor, kitchen, living room. You can see in the bottom right there, that looks out into the garden of the main house. And then we have a two-piece bathroom on the first floor, and then stairs going up to the second floor. And on the second floor, we have 2 bedrooms, a very nice big bathroom with a walk-in shower, no lip, so that when we get old and infirm, we're not going to trip over that. And it's a beautiful house. As it turns out, the tenants who have been living in there for 3 years gave notice December 26th. So Karen and I, my wife, are going to be moving in there on June 1st, and we're going to be renting out our main house. So if you know of anybody who's in Toronto looking for that, let me know. So why did we build a laneway house? First and foremost, because we want to age in place. I think we all know this, and looking at the age of people in this room, I think we're all in kind of similar circumstances. It's like we want to stay in our neighborhood. We want to remain close to our friends. How are we going to do that? The main house be too complicated to retrofit that into various things, so we decided let's build it from scratch. Let's make something that we can age in place. We wanted to increase our financial security. Both my partner and I have been kind of in the not-for-profit sector for most of our lives. We have, knock on wood, done well, but we're not rich. We do not have, super wealthy. We've saved money, but we're going to be relying on our RSPs, defined pension plans. That's ancient history. None of that exists. So having a laneway house allows us to live there. We rent out the main house. And that means instead of our savings going like this over time, our savings will hopefully go like that over time. We'll make them last longer because we're collecting rent from the main house. But it also, the reason we're doing this is because we're overhoused. I have given a lot of these talks, and I can tell you at almost every talk somebody comes and says, yeah, I'm living alone in a suburban single-family house with 3 or 4 bedrooms. And I know I'm overhoused, but what can I do? I don't know where to move to. So keep that in mind. So we have a housing crisis. I think everybody knows that. Karen alluded to that. We know that things aren't working properly. Just some examples of that. For as long as I can remember, the general rule of thumb was that no more than 30% of your gross household income should go towards your housing costs, your rent or your mortgages. That's been, I actually haven't done this yet. I should kind of do the research on this, but this has been around for a long, long time. I'm not sure it's enshrined in any legislation, but it's understood. It shouldn't be more than 30%. And I think most of us kind of probably understand. It's a good rule of thumb. This allows you to save money. It allows you to pay all the bills. It allows you to have a decent life. Now, as I was preparing this deck, this is a version of a deck I've been giving for about 2 or 3 months. I decided, okay, let's put some actual numbers to this to see what it looks like. So I went to ZipRecruiter.com and said, okay, what's the average annual salary in Ontario as of September 2024? Well, just shy of $55,000. Then I went to another website, rentals.ca, and said, what's the average annual rent for a 1-bedroom apartment in Ontario? $26,000. You just do the math, that almost gets you to 50%. Now, admittedly, if you're a couple living in a 1-bedroom, you're getting, and you're both earning average salary, you're at about 25, 26%, but not everybody's in a couple. But that gives you a sense, and these are averages. I should have chosen the median, but I couldn't find it. For those of you concerned about statistics. Then I looked at, well, let's look at the numbers about buying a house. And so again, I assumed, okay, average annual salary in Ontario, multiply that by 2, you've got 2 people, that gets you to just shy of $110,000. And then I went to this interesting tool on the CBC website that allows you to find out how much of a home you can afford, what price you can afford. So it asks you to input a whole bunch of information, including what your salary is, how much your down payment is, what the interest rate is, what debts you have, etc. And I thought, okay, well, let's put in a very optimistic scenario. Two people earning average salary, somehow or another they have cobbled together $250,000 in savings, or the bank of mom and dad have provided them with, you know, that money. 5% interest and no debts. And plug it in, and out comes, you can afford to buy a house for $545,000. Then I looked at what the average house price in Ontario was in September 2024, 850 plus. So we know this intuitively. All of you know people, maybe they're your children, maybe they're friends of your children, who are having struggle finding a place to live and affording it. Or are in a position, like my daughter who lives in Ottawa, who's paying significantly more than 30% of her salary on rent. So there are a lot of people out there who can't afford the homes they need. In I guess it was summer 2023, we worked with an organization out of UBC, University of British Columbia, that looks at housing affordability. And what they did was they took StatsCan census data from 2021, and don't ask me how they do this, but they essentially identified what people's incomes were, household incomes were, how big the home was that they were living in, and what percentage of rent they were paying or housing costs they were paying. And they concluded, they looked at the numbers and concluded that there are almost 640,000 households in Ontario that are living in homes that are the wrong size. Typically, they're too small for the number of people living there, and cost way more than what people can afford. I mean, that's a pretty disturbing number. Now, that doesn't mean we have to build 640,000 new homes. What it means is that there are well over 500,000 people who are not living in an appropriate sized and an appropriate priced home. Now, I've been giving talks like this to people not just living in the Greater Golden Horseshoe, but also outside of Greater Golden Horseshoe. Recently, I gave a talk to people in Bruce County. And as I realized, both with talking to people and also doing research, that there are a lot of rural residents that live, you know, especially around Stratford and most rural areas in Ontario, that have few housing choices for aging in place. I was talking about this earlier. The challenge is, if they want to find appropriate housing, they have to leave their community. They have to leave their friends. And many don't want to do that for obvious reasons. I know that. That's why we built our laneway house. Or they have to accept inappropriate housing in locations that are not suited for older people. Sometimes that means staying in the house you're in. For rural people, it may be, you know, you're quite some distance away from a village, or it's just not appropriately designed, you know, for getting older, the inevitable aches and pains you get in your limbs and so forth. But when people, if the choice is, oh, I have to leave my home and my community or go elsewhere, like, that shouldn't be like that. There's something wrong when those are the only choices available to people. Another key problem facing us, and this is for I think most of you who care about the environment, the housing crisis is used to justify eliminating policies that support climate resilience and to build climate resilient homes in neighborhoods. For those of you who are keeping track of what's been happening at the provincial government level since 2022, you'll know that there have been attacks on the Greenbelt. The Premier announced in fall of, I think it was November 2022, he wanted to take 6,000 or 7,500 acres, 400 acres out of the Greenbelt. His justification, we need land for housing. Wrong. there's more than enough land that's already there. There has been an attack on conservation authorities. Planning laws have been changed to dramatically reduce the ability of conservation authorities to play a role in new developments. Conservation authorities were developed, as some of you may know, in the 50s and 60s in Toronto. None of you, well, I don't know if any of you will remember Hurricane Hazel. I don't, but there needed to be a body that said, wait a minute, we need to look at these developments not from the perspective of just housing or whatever, but how is that affecting the natural systems that we depend on to deal with water, to deal with floodwaters, etc. Conservation authorities have been dramatically, or their powers have been dramatically reduced with existing government legislation that's been passed in the last 2 years. Endangered species laws have been affected. And again, the justification has been, oh, these are red tape, they create a lot of unnecessary bureaucracy, they increase housing costs, we need to get rid of them, or we need to put them in their place. The narrative, the story has been set up, it's an either or. If you want housing, you can't have these. There's been an attack on green building standards. Green building standards are a no-brainer. I know this because in the City of Toronto, we've had green building standards for many years, and it has actually raised the bar slowly but surely. It's been done very deliberately and very effectively, and it's been very successful in slowly but surely reducing the greenhouse gas emissions that come from new builds, and also in creating the kind of infrastructure that will help us reduce carbon emissions. They're now being attacked. And of course, to me, what was just such an obvious but such a tragic situation, we are now having to subsidize fossil gas connections to new homes. There was a law that was passed 5 months ago, I can't remember exactly when, essentially mandating that when there's new home construction, the builders have to put in a natural gas connection. Like, why? I live in a house, our laneway house and our main house we have no natural gas or fossil gas connection anymore to the house. We have heat pumps for heating and cooling. We have hot water heaters that are electric. It's all electric. It's a lot cheaper too, like significantly cheaper. I know this now because we've got like 2 years of experience. But the housing crisis has been used to justify eliminating and doing a whole bunch of things that not only make good climate sense, but they make good economic sense.